Surviving the Lion's Den by Matt Scott. Narrated by David Temple. Chapter 13. Qom, Iran. After a brisk 2-hour drive from Tehran, Aslani pulled into Kahak village and parked in front of the lounge, as the Revolutionary Guard called it. As far as containment centers go, it didn't possess the technological advancements commonly associated with those maintained by Western intelligence agencies, but it didn't have to. Iran learned long ago that simplicity helped them stay below the radar in an age of digital surveillance. The house was more than 100 years old, but it served the Revolutionary Guard well for interrogations. Despite its domed roof giving the appearance of an astrological observatory, which helped with its disguise, it was dull on the outside, but regally Gothic inside. Constructed with brick, red clay, and stone, its design allowed the sounds of pain from torture within to be contained. For those outside, a lack of windows provided an absence of time. Here at the lounge, mental anguish was equally as important as physical torture. The lounge wasn't without its modern renovations, though. The Supreme Leader saw enough value in the former bathhouse that he allocated a cool $2 million in upgrades. The inside was gutted and reborn. The holding cells were constructed with steel bars in between 2 stone walls to prevent prisoner communication and any tunneling, should the hostages be inclined to try. The builders used raised cobblestone pebbles on the floor to make it uncomfortable to stand or lay on. Access to the cells were permitted only via soundproof solid steel doors, no bars. The prisoner's only link to the outside was a sliding window in the door at eye level, which the guards normally left closed, but could leave open for a variety of reasons. Recognition of day or night was by way of a half-inch sliver of space separating the walls from the roof, the lone way the rooms were illuminated. Electricity in the holding cells was limited to the night vision cameras on the ceiling that kept a watchful eye on the detainees. None of the holding cells had running water, and the toilet was a rusty metal bucket in the corner which lower-ranking guards complained about emptying. The only so-called comforts were a 1-inch thick foam mat and a blanket. Those who knew about the main interrogation room were in awe of it. For security reasons, knowledge of and access to the lounge was kept to a minimum. Lining the 20-foot by 30-foot dank room was a weapons armory full of various length daggers, knives, and Arabian swords, all of which were shined and sharpened to perfection. The weapons were enclosed behind metal lockers mounted to the wall when not in use, but the locker doors were often left open for intimidation purposes when a prisoner was present and unhooded. A single whip was used by the guards to perform their duties. Each of the 10 2-foot-long strands were made of braided leather with remnants of skin tissue from previous victims stuck to the knots tied at the end, but they were dipped in goat's blood before a prisoner was brought in and displayed on an oak table for effect. They were never rinsed and carried the stench of at least 2 skunks. Though other non-stationary chairs were occasionally used, the primary chair for prisoners was bolted to the floor in the center of the room. Serving as a minivan of misery, the guards would adjust it backward, forward, or lay it flat, depending on their whims of torture. To ensure that the structure blended in with other houses in the area, a standard oak door, found in any suburban home, adorned the outside. After unlocking the double deadbolt, Aslani stepped inside, relocked it, and looked up at the security camera above the secondary steel door. After being buzzed in, Aslani didn't return a salute from the sergeant as he made a beeline down the stairway to the guard station outside the interrogation room. There was no two-way mirror, but the 50-inch monitor displayed the events from the adjacent room via CCTV camera.
"I got a call on my way here," Aslani said as he charged into the room. "Remember the name of that Libyan colonel that the American gave up? The general told me that their intelligence service threw him off the roof of a building." "Good. How many is that now?" asked Aslani's right-hand man, Lieutenant Mahmoud Yadzani. 7 names, 7 kills. What about today? Any progress?" "Nothing. He's really holding back on anyone he knows in Iraq and has withstood some hard hits. After all that he's experienced, he keeps holding out. Impressive, really? How hard have you pushed him?
Mahmoud turned his square-jawed head and sneered at his superior.
As hard as you've let me. If you would allow me to experiment on him like we did a few months ago, I could get what we need. No, the general specifically said he wants him in fair condition when we hand him over to the Russians. So we can't go overboard.
Aslani spit on the floor.
But I've got another idea. Did you pick up what I asked for? In the fridge, but here,
Yadzani said, tossing Aslani a box of latex gloves.
You should probably put those on.
Tom DeLange sat upright in the aluminum chair with only a pair of boxers covering him. His chest was riddled with bruises and knife cuts that showed signs of healing. The black hood over his head palpitated as he sucked warm air in and out. His cheeks and jaws were again swollen, but at least his nose wasn't broken this time. Having spit out another tooth from the latest round of strikes, blood was dribbling from his mouth onto his chest. The fractured bones in his wrists from previous sessions had thankfully settled, but were strapped to the chair. This beating was mild compared to some others, but pain was pain. It hurt like hell. However, the bag over his head was a new touch for him, at least while sitting in the chair. Ever since he had arrived, wherever he was located, he had been able to see his captors during interrogations, despite the bright lights. This told him that today's interrogation was foreplay, and was about to be cranked up. The metal buckles from the leather straps holding him down jingled as his leg tremored with nervous energy. As the steel door croaked open, a pungent and sharp smell entered the air. Business was about to pick up. Aslani entered with a metal bowl in his now gloved hands and a respirator strapped to his face. Mahmoud entered with him, carrying his own bucket, and mimicked his boss's look.
My colleague tells me that you've been particularly strong today. Good for you.
His sarcastic words were muffled by the respirator, but clear.
Let's put that strength of yours to the test.
Aslani put the bowl below DeLange's chin and let the aroma of its contents wiggle up the hood into his sinuses. DeLange went into a coughing fit and tears leaked down his cheeks. Aslani laughed.
That squashed ghost pepper. One of the hottest of its kind in the world. It's 100 times hotter than the jalapeno peppers you stupid Americans use on your chicken wings. Our friends in India hang it on fences to keep elephants away.
Smells better than your mother's pussy.
DeLange spat back. The prisoner's comment sparked a rage in Aslani that burned hotter than the peppers he held.
You'll regret saying that.
Aslani slammed the bowl on the wooden table. He and Mahmoud stepped behind DeLange and lifted the bag off his head. DeLange was temporarily blinded by the light, but it didn't last long, as Aslani replaced the hood with a blindfold that covered only his eyes. Mahmoud pulled a handle on the chair that reclined it backward.
Get the gag!
Aslani grabbed DeLange by the face and squeezed his cheeks. DeLange gritted his teeth to keep from opening his mouth, but the pressure on the spot where he'd lost a tooth just minutes ago was impossible to bear. Mahmoud returned with a metal device, and Aslani slid the top and bottom pieces between the prisoner's teeth. Then he squeezed the levers on the side together and pumped DeLange's jaws open. He tried to speak, but could only spout gibberish. In one swoop, Aslani reached into the bowl with a finger's worth of the smushed ghost pepper and smeared it down the bottom row of DeLange's teeth. The scorching sting from the pepper buried itself into the empty tooth cavity like a tick and chomped into the nerve. DeLange screamed and spasmed in the chair like a wild marlin. The residual nerve pain instantly shot to his other extremities. Aslani and Yazdani's laughs could be heard through their respirators.
How's that feel, my little CIA pig?
Said Mahmoud.
Give me the name of one of your contacts in Iraq, and we'll give you some milk to smother the heat.
DeLange didn't respond. He couldn't. He'd passed out from the pain. Aslani took some pepper juice from the bowl and wiped a streak across his prisoner's scraggly mustache. Once the robust smell forced him awake, he promptly began screaming again.
Give me a name, or we go again. This time, I'll stuff the pepper into your open wounds and sew it shut myself.
Hardly able to form words with his lips, DeLange still managed to utter a barely discernible,
Fuck you.
Without hesitation, Mahmoud snatched the whip and began lashing at DeLange's thighs. The cuts weren't overly deep, but enough to draw blood. Next, he pulled out a pocket knife and tore off the prisoner's underwear, exposing his manhood. Oh, God, DeLange thought. Following his colleague's lead, Aslani dumped the rest of the bowl's contents into the agent's lap. Not only did the searing heat stake its claim in the open cuts, but the pepper juices leaked into the man's pee pipe. DeLange wailed with all his might and shimmied his hips up and down to get the pepper off of him.
Give me a name now!
DeLange thrashed back and forth, trying to make the pain stop, but it grew inside his open skin. He had no choice but to give them the least impactful name he could think of, and began yammering unintelligible words until Mahmoud removed the gag.
Kazim Al-Nasho. Now get this shit off of me.
Aslani smirked and nodded at Mahmoud, who grabbed a bucket and slung the milk over the American's pathetic body. The pain was momentarily alleviated until DeLange passed out again.
Get him washed up and give him his clothes,
Aslani said.
I'll brief the general and see what I can find on this Hanasho.
Aslani turned and left the room.